To our first one of our taster sessions, particularly around human-centered leadership and coaching. And the focus today is very much on coaching. I'm going to share with you some slides in a few minutes, but let's get started and thinking about what this is all about. We're delighted to bring to you some current thinking about coaching. And specifically, we want to make it a little bit different. We want to maybe be a little bit more controversial today. And it really is an invitation to take you into something slightly new. And we're going to be making some distinctions along the way between maybe slightly more traditional or older style coaching and into this particular new way of human-centric coaching. So we're delighted, absolutely delighted to be in conversation with you and to start opening up some of these possibilities. And I've got my colleague, Darren O'Connor. Anna, you'll be pleased to know he's in the background here, and he's going to start us off with a little bit of an introduction, and we're going to be using Slido. So Darren, it's over to you to introduce us into Slido, please.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, hi everyone. So yeah, I'm going to share screen in a second and invite you to participate in a Slido poll. You'll need your mobile, or you could probably do it off your laptop or whatever you're working on right now. And I will just share. Hang on, let's just get the right thing set up.
Yes, so you need to get your phones at the ready because we're going to ask you to do this poll.
Yeah, so there's more people just coming in. I'll just let them in.
No, don't worry, I've let them in, Darren. You just focus on the Slido.
Okay, will do.
So we've got a question that we want you to be thinking about.
So hopefully you can all see poll appearing now. And for those who haven't used Slido before, you either use the QR code at the top, so you could just scan that with your mobile, or you can go to slido.com and enter in that hashtag code that you can see on screen. So we're asking for your succinct response to this question, 6 words max. Sorry, that's a bit demanding, but why do you coach? What's your reason for doing this?
Look, to help. Yeah.
Nice and succinct there, 2 words.
That was support. Yeah, love it. Let's keep going. To help others achieve their goals, empower, to live their potential, to develop, lots of developing coming on there, to make a difference.
Help fascinating people. I like that one. Help fascinating people.
To connect with somebody else, to make a difference. Support is coming up large. Make a difference is coming up large. Develop is as well. So obviously, these are really important ones to everybody. Unblock, to facilitate discovery. I love that, don't you, Darren?
Yeah, absolutely. Fulfillment, lovely to see that in there. Fulfillment, meaning and purpose. That's a really striking summary there.
I love this language. Make a difference, unlock and move on. Excellent. To make the world a better place. Love it.
Yeah, love the ambition there. Transformational change as well. Reaching potential. Potentials come through in lots of different ways. So ideally that ought to be highlighted as well as a big theme in this. Unlock and move on. That's an interesting one. Okay.
Well, look, I'm gonna stop that now because we can collect this and we can forward this on to you as an anonymous little Slido. But there is some amazing stuff there, isn't there? Reaching potential, inspire, transformational change. Love it all. Right, Darren, come off your Slido because I'm gonna grab the limelight and start sharing my slide pack. So let's have a look. I'm hoping this is coming up here. So what are we doing here? Human-centered leadership. You've come up with some lovely things about what it's all about and looking at those why people coach. But this is just a summary, I think, and hopefully it'll ring true to all of you. We believe here at Passe-Partout that we coach people to help them achieve positive change. Very much aligned to our own personal values, and it sounds like it's very much aligned to your values as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about as we go through this session today. And we've got just a little agenda that we're going to talk you through. So we've done the welcome and introductions. We've done it in a little bit less time than we said, 10 minutes. But we're going to start then exploring this thing we're calling the grey box. We're going to think a little bit about robots. So if we're talking about human-centered, we need to actually have the opposite. So we are going to talk about robots for a minute. And then we're going to move into what we actually mean by this human-centered approach and actually what it would look like, what it feel like, does it actually mean for you. We're aiming very ambitiously to manage to do that all in this hour that we've got together. But it's all about looking at things in a slightly different lens. So let's start off with this grey box. You know, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by a grey box? So it's something, it's not quite like a black box, but it's like our way of looking at coaching that seems to have developed over a period of time. And if we think about that timeline of coaching, it's been going for 100 years. I mean, that is quite amazing, isn't it? That actually we've been coaching people all that long. And you can see how that's developed over time from the 1920s, very much looking at the psychological impact on people and organizations. Moving into the 40s, they started counseling senior executives. Very much the occupational psychology movement was born about that sort of time, and then it's rushed through the 70s and into the present time, looking at executive coaching. I mean, there's a coach for everything these days, isn't there? And team coaching, group coaching is really something very much at the forefront as we look at this. But, you know, has this clarity of coaching, has that happened? Are we any clearer about what we mean by coaching? Does that matter? These are things that, you know, I'd like you to be thinking about. When we start looking at this, we start thinking about, there's a £20 billion market in US dollars for this. Well, what's it all about? We've got all these models. I mean, we are an enthusiastic bunch, aren't we, as coaches? We come up for a model with everything. And if we Googled it now, we could find hundreds and hundreds of models. Are we overly dependent on those models? Have we lost the human touch in all of this? Is that important? I would say actually we're putting some constraints on ourselves, and maybe that's what's in the grey box here. You know, we're actually can find some really wacky. We're suckers for this approach, and we can find some wacky approaches to it, and maybe that's a good thing. I'm not saying it isn't. But one of the things, when we start thinking about the way it's developed over time, I think we have done, and maybe this is forcing us into a very constrained approach, is it's almost like the commandments that have come down. Things that we should and we shouldn't do. And we have this very much, don't we, in our mindset. Thou shalt not advise. I can bet some of you can remember that when you had your initial training. Thou shalt not counsel. Thou shalt not express a personal opinion as a coach. Thou shalt not get too close to the client. You might have more to add to that. If you do, pop them into the chat. Some of our, I want to say, sacred cows, things that we have developed over time that become so part of our practice that I feel they might constrain us. They might inhibit us. They might actually close down our opportunities. They might actually make it more reductive and constrained to be an effective coach. Is that the case for us? So we're going to move on and look at something which is a bit more reductive, and that could be the AI approach to coaching. And then we're going to expand up into a glorious technicolor as we move on. So I'm going to pass back over to Darren to take us into this AI type approach. And I'm happy to carry on showing the slides, Darren, for you. You're on mute.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, so yeah, if you want to flick on to the next one then. So the grey box that Alex was talking about, the kind of the layers and the mystification that have kind of built up over coaching over that kind of period of 100 years, as Alex is saying, it perhaps is creating these constraints that we need to break out of. And one kind of field where quite a lot of breakthroughs are happening is obviously artificial intelligence. And I'm sure there are plenty of people on this call who will have some experience, understanding of how coaching is starting to be merged with the AI world, the artificial intelligence world. So Alex, if you want to flick it on. So the answer to that question, do we need human coaches? Here's someone who says pretty emphatically, no, we don't. This is Sabre, company that creates coaching bots, and they believe that these coaching bots, these digital coaches, can actually do it better than human coaches. Interestingly, just before this session, I wanted to just remind myself about Sabre. So I Googled them and they're temporarily closed. Not sure what that tells us. But anyway, it doesn't tell us that AI and bots for coaching is not a thing, because Alex, if you want to flick it on, if you Google AI and coaching, this particular app will come up very high, maybe top, Rocky.ai. It seems to be a pretty successful and widely used coaching app. I like the fact that actually it has this focus on growth mindset, so that gives you this kind of clarity and this focus. But it's out there, it's happening, and I'm sure a lot of you will know this already. Alex, if you'd like to flick it on. Another thing in preparation I did for this is I thought I'll just have a quick go at seeing if ChatGPT can coach me. I wonder if anyone's ever tried that on this call. And over the next couple of slides, we're just going to show you how that actually went. So I started off very politely. Hi, ChatGPT. I don't tend to read slides out. I think we don't like that practice, do we? But I think in this case, for accessibility, I will read word for word some of this stuff. So, hi, ChatGPT. I have an issue. I wonder if you could coach me on it. And ChatGPT says, of course, I'd be happy to help. What's the issue you're facing? And that's the little summary I gave of it. I seem to be overwhelmed with stuff to do. I'm not telling you if this is real or fictional. It's never ending and makes me feel like I'm going nowhere. So that was the premise. And that is what I got back as the response from ChatGPT within seconds. I'm sure most of you will know how quickly that works. And that's a very familiar kind of numbered list with the kind of headline items. That's the way it works, isn't it? So feeling overwhelmed by a never-ending to-do list is a common challenge. Let's break it down. And then it's given me these 8 perfectly practical, sensible suggestions for things that I could be doing to get through my overwhelm. And then, Alex, if you want to flick it on. And here's how the conversation ended. Remember, it's normal to feel overwhelmed at times. Be kind to yourself. Take it one step at a time. You're making progress, even if it doesn't always feel like it. I said politely, yes, thanks, ChatGPT. ChatGPT responded at the end, you're welcome. If you need any more advice or just want to talk through anything else, feel free to reach out anytime. You've got this. So, a heartwarming conversation. Now, Alex is going to sort of start to explore in a second what might be some of the limitations that we see and we experience with that kind of interaction. But, you'd have to say there's definitely some pluses and some, it's actually quite impressive what was generated in such an incredibly short period of time. So we're kind of wondering whether any of you have done this before. It's really simple. And if you actually want to give it a go now, we reckon you can do it within a matter of couple of minutes. We're going to be really generous and give you 5. So Alex, if you want to flick on. Here's a quick experiment for you then. So if you go to ChatGPT, you don't need to use that link necessarily. You could just, Google ChatGPT, go in, have an issue to type in, and I would suggest making it a fairly kind of simple one, and then just sit back and see what you get. My advice to you would be to make sure that you're very polite, say please and thank you, because one day ChatGPT may well rule the world, so you want to be on the right side of the robots, don't you? But anyway, have a quick go at this if you've not done it before. And for anyone who has already had a go, I think maybe if we stop presenting now, it might be quite interesting to see anybody's experiences in chat about, what have you actually tried? What was your experience? So Alex, do you want to stop sharing and see if there's any contributions in chat to this? So I'm sure some people are giving it a go, which is great. And some of you may not have to because you've already done it. And if you're in that category, let us know in chat what was your experience.
Oh, we have some here lacking emotion and does not appreciate the challenges of human personalities. Thank you, Emma. Very good advice, though. Yeah, we thought that. We thought very good advice. Anybody else? Is anybody else having a little go in real time? Because we'd love to hear from you as well.
I'm going to give it a couple of minutes just for people to see if they can get somewhere. But yeah, I don't think
Charlie
you can argue.
Allen is telling us that there's lots of advice from ChatGPT. But anybody actually doing it in real time? Because we'd be really interested to know if there's any interesting advice. Colette's just started using it and finding it very useful when stuck on how to phrase something. Yeah.
It's quite clinical though, isn't it? It just says how it is, and then you think, actually, I know the person that I was talking about wouldn't necessarily respond to that. So it's tricky, isn't it?
It is tricky. It is tricky. I'm very interested, though, whether people actually use that. Oh, Zoe.
I haven't used it for this purpose. I've used it for, I did a bit of an experiment because I work in talent to see if it could analyse how to answer and how to apply for a job using the job spec, and that was quite interesting and quite practically helpful. But I've just experimenting and said, can you coach me on an issue? And what I've noticed is the advice is really, it's practical, it's fine. And that it's kind of mechanically trying to say things like, so I said, I'm feeling overwhelmed by my work. And it said, feeling overwhelmed by work is tough, but you can tackle it. Let's break it down. What specifically is causing the overwhelm? What is it, the volume of tasks, their complexity, or something else? So it did actually start to ask some coaching questions.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I don't feel heard because I know it's ChatGPT. So that's my response.
Fabulous. And thank you so much for coming into the room and sharing that. Because absolutely, there's nothing wrong with the advice, is it? It's clear, it's succinct. And look, Stephanie is saying, they even said, take a deep breath first. So, there is some interesting human dynamic that's being brought into this particular type of coaching by ChatGPT or similar approaches. But what we'd like to do is take us into a slightly different realm. And I'm going to put my slide pack back on again, because if we've got ChatGPT doing AI type of coaching, I actually think that is permission, but actually it's wider than that. That's a responsibility for us as coaches to be offering something different, to be really tapping into what is it that makes us human and makes us the best coaches possible. Because I don't believe that AI really can get there. I think humans, it's one of the few things that AI is never going to get to, but we need to tap into our own humanity to make it as best as we can be. So let me just find my slide pack again and take you in a journey of some of the things that I think are important. So here we go. Let's see where we end up. Just taking a couple of minutes to load. Here we go. So we've done our little experiment. We now need to move into something different. And here we go. I think it's so important to be focusing on the full realms that we have at our disposal as being human. Obviously, the head part is where we go to with ChatGPT. They're more than capable of getting into the domain of our cognitive functionality. But they're going to struggle much harder to get into the heart and the hands of the matter. And even though they're giving us the advice of taking a deep breath, which might feel more heart and hands, we know that that's a computer that's offering that support. So what I'd like to do is just take us through into coaching at a deeper level. And I think this is where we've got such opportunity and possibility as humans to make a real difference, to change lives fundamentally. So the cognitive bit, the bit about doing and attaining tasks, is very much what ChatGPT can do, but it's also very much around maybe a grow model of coaching. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think we can do more. I think we can get in deeper and we can be thinking about different methods of learning and working in that how space with people, developing the competencies which actually are providing the self-generative approaches. So people are able to change their way of being and into a way of operating which takes us into the who. So that is all about the patience, and it could be about integration. And actually, as good coaches, we probably need to use all those elements. But most of us will be doing that, I think, at some degree of level. But I'm trying to get us to think about it and to feel it, and also to put it into practice. So this is an interesting kind of model to be thinking about that. But this is what takes it to a much deeper level. And in my experience, I find that people do operate in that cognitive space. They spend time in there. They think about thinking their way out of a problem. That's where they go to. Most of us do that, but I think coaches do that as well. We end up living in that cognitive space. But if we can actually take it much further, I think we're going to be much more successful. Wouldn't it be great if the possibility was actually to get our coaches or our clients to think in a much more emotional way, to be in that somatic place, to be in a relational space, and maybe even a spiritual place or a community-based space. So it's a way of offering our clients and our coachees an invitation to use new language and new practices. And they may well be residing in all those elements that we're talking about. And I think there's something around us being, as coaches, maybe a bit more playful and experiential around some of those things. I like to think about the emotional space and actually getting my clients to think about how they feel about others. But actually, what I think is really beneficial is when I, as the coach, am reacting to their emotional space. So when they're telling me about how they feel about maybe somebody in a relationship they have, I, as the coach, whether I'm on the screen or whether I'm actually there in presence with them, will feel something in about how they describe it to me. And that feeling that I get is really useful to play back to the person that I'm coaching. So if they're talking about somebody and they're obviously very angry, just as an example, they may be very angry about that relationship. I can actually feel that anger. And by maybe surfacing the fact that their anger is affecting me, it can actually help them to get in further about why they might be feeling that anger about somebody. And actually, that enables us as the coach to understand our own stream of competency aligned with our coachee. And probably we need to be a step ahead of them. We need to have done this thought process a step ahead to be able to offer the best possible approach to being human in the coaching space. I love the bit around spirituality, because I think that's completely non-faith based. We can be thinking about the communities that we are in. We can think about the way that we operate with others in this kind of wider world that we all inhabit. And the real key to getting this human-centered coaching approach off the ground is actually to be able to integrate all of those approaches together. And that helps us move into a potential different way of being. So if we're thinking about all of this as being important, I'd just like to make us think about why it might be important and why it's important now to get a different type of approaching to coach. Okay. And some of this, I think, we'll be very familiar with. We all know how difficult the world is out there. And a narrative that I think a lot of people are running is the world is on fire. And for that, it creates a feeling of anxiety, and our nervous system is on high alert. It may well be, and that this research is telling us, that feeling stressed is actually something that is going on all the time. This particular piece of work, which was done by Harvard Business School, is saying that employees are feeling stressed out. And the principal reason for this is the endless stream of transformations and change initiatives. Now, some of that has been kicked on even faster by the pandemic, but it is definitely something that people are feeling. This piece of research actually looked at nearly 4,000 employees across 11 countries. So it's not just something that's happening in the US or the UK. So if we're working with people like that, we need to develop a kind of a different approach to the way that we're supporting them. And human-centered coaching is certainly one way of doing that. Gartner is saying that they found that when people are working with and experiencing human-centric work models, they are much more likely to be effective, to be fulfilled, to alleviate suffering, etc. They're much more likely to be performing 3.8% more, 3.8 times more likely to perform, 3.2% more likely to actually stay in their employment, and 3.1% more likely to show low levels of fatigue and higher levels of mental health. So the fact that we're in Mental Health Awareness Week, it feels very opportune to be talking about some of these studies, and this is a solution to some of the problems that people have in organizations. So what does it take to coach in this slightly different way? I think it takes quite a lot, actually. I think it is quite a different approach. I think it is encouraging people to be much more in a relational space. I can notice there that Charlie is saying that. And I think there are particular types of people that are drawn to this type of practice. I think I've got somebody mowing the lawn outside. I'm sorry about that. But these are the things that I think have become hugely important to coach in this way. There is something around empathy, there's something about authenticity, and there's something around flexibility. And I think all of that is what we would have always said. But we need to take that into a slightly different level when we're talking about this human-centered approach. Because let's face it, our AI colleague there from J1gVq, they did their best to show a little bit of empathy, take a breath before you start, etc., etc. But what we're wanting to do is we're actually wanting to take it right the way down a different level. And we all have in our worlds a structure of interpretation. So we all are individual humans that have developed a structure of interpretation to make sense of the world that's around us. And for me, that's been developed by not only our narrative and the way that we have developed, it's also about the education or the environment that we may well have come from. It might be the way we've been parented. It might be the way our world of work has created for us. But we have created a way of seeing the world, our own structure of interpretation. And every single individual has done that. And some people get very stuck in their structure of interpretation. So we're actually wanting to, as part of this approach, allow people to look at things from different perspectives, from different insights, and actually get into a different way of being through that. Now, I'm very conscious that I've talked a lot so far, so I'm going to just stop sharing for a minute and see if we've got any questions that we might want to bring so far into what we're saying. I'm just stopping presenting for 1 minute there. On that note of structure of interpretations, have we got any questions? Yes, Myrtle, please.
Yeah, it's just a comment, not a question. I'm sort of leaning towards this model because one of the things I've always been thinking about is the traditional coaching models does not sort of look at things around equity and particularly, you know, creating that sort of psychological safety and using your experience, that empathy and sympathy. And if you as a coach have been through certain things, you know, sort of discrimination, prejudice, you know, using that experience because you've been through it. So you are enabled to kind of pull out certain things from, you know, the client. And I like that because it gives you the opportunity to do that. Yeah, and I think that's the closest I've seen to the sort of model I've been looking at and questioning the traditional models and saying it's lacking that. So that's the closest one I've seen so far.
Yeah, thank you. And the model looking at those 6 competencies allows for a discussion around some of the issues around equality and diversity and inclusion, about thinking about how not only just thinking, see, I fall into that trap of cognitive, but how it makes you feel, how it would affect relational elements, how you integrate some of those things together. And the feeling and discussion around structure of interpretation actually brings you, I mean, we might want to call that lived experience, or we might want to call it something else, but I actually quite like the language of structure of interpretation because that brings in so many other elements and it creates a conversation to be had between the coach and the client around what that actually really means. It gets much deeper into having a very powerful conversation. Thank you. I'm conscious, Joe, have you got anything to...
Just very briefly. Yeah, I love it. Just really aligns with how I am. So I think I've probably been doing a lot of that just naturally. But what I was interested in was it the Gartner's study, because I just noticed that so much in the, you know, when the coaching is not career or this, it was, I kept calling it sort of resilience or well-being coaching because it was very much in that area. So to use that, you know, that empathy was very much like that. And I just thought it was interesting that it's picked that up. It almost feels like a different type of coaching. In that you're not stuck with them, empathizing, you are helping them to move on, but you definitely need a bit more empathy and a little bit less of the driving forward, a little bit more authenticity and empathy before you start moving on. You know, you have to spend a bit more time in that area, exploring that before you sort of say, come on, let's gently move on. That's what I was finding.
Yeah,
you know,
and Jo and Myrtle, for me, goal-centered coaching had become quite narrow and frustrating. And this isn't goal-centered. This is human-centered, and it's about a little bit alleviating suffering. It's being able to be shoulder to shoulder with somebody, to turn towards that suffering, to find a way through it. And that, I think, is quite important. And the language that we use is really important, that we can change that language from that very objective, goal-centered approach.
Yeah, I think we called it decompression coaching. We have to label it. And someone said, well, what do you mean, Jo, you do decompression? I said, we're more listening and empathy than what you're going to do and striving for a goal, because you have to do that. They had to do that first. So yes, so I think we have been experimenting with that.
Lovely, thank you. Charlie, and it's lovely to see you, Charlie.
Yeah, great to see you. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the approach. I suppose my thought is about ethical practice, really. And I'm aware, when working with human emotion and empathy, of both the value of it, but also the where it can take you personally as a practitioner, and the need to have say kind of looked internally to enable you to look outwardly and work with another in that space. And I wondered what your thoughts were around kind of ethical practice, professionalization, you know, competencies, that sort of thing.
Right, you're bang on the money with some of this, aren't you? And it's something I'm going to come on to, about the internal work and what we need to do with ourselves to keep ourselves safe. So, and I believe in this approach that we do need to do quite a lot of work on self as coaches, and that needs to be part of our ethics and our practice, that we are continuing to keep that internal mechanism going. So, for instance, I have a therapist that I see every other week, and it's part of my practice now. And it's part of this type of coaching that I see that to be really important for me. So I'll put my hand up and say that's what I'm doing to keep myself safe. But what I also believe, and if you look at the ICF, which is obviously one of the big guardians of the coaching movement, the language that is changing about ethics and expectation. So the neutrality of coaching, which was very much part of the goal-centered approach, is moving away. And if you look at that, I think it's really positive. I think it's really positive for us in this space. Yeah.
Thanks.
So thank you. Has anybody got any other questions? Because otherwise I do feel I need to kind of crack on a little bit. Okay, let's go for it then. So I'm going to continue to share my presentation. It just takes a couple of minutes to come up. Okay, here we go. So we want to work on now actually looking at what Charlie's just brought to us. So thank you for the link, Charlie, here. The work on ourselves, it becomes really important to move in this type of place. I believe, you know, we've got to have that humility, and we've got to have a way that we are able to be pretty much 100% focused on the client. So that our own, let's call it ego, is not in the mix here. The humility that we have, that ability to be standing shoulder by shoulder with the person. But to do that, our continuous learning. We need continuous learning. There's so much out there, and some of that will be therapeutic learning. that we bring into the space. The learning goes across all of those competencies. So let's go to the somatic competency. I think that's one that is so poorly represented in both leadership training and in coaching. And our somatics are absolutely important to all of this. So by that, I mean being able to calm, having our own ways as the coach to calm our own nervous system before we go into a coaching discussion, which may well be a meditative process or a sitting practice or whatever it might be. But we need to find a way that we are calm into our coach. If we're not, we bring this huge amount of baggage into the space, which is unhelpful for the client that it will receive our somatic response to them. But equally, we need to be thinking about their somatic response back to us and what's triggering, etc. The whole bit about experimentation becomes important, and trying new things. And again, I would feel to do that shoulder by shoulder with somebody. So it may well be that we do some breathing practice. We might do some journaling together. We might actually do something physical. So we might go for a walk together. We might do some yoga together. We might cook together. In my case, I might get them out to see the horse together. You bring a deeper level of work with somebody to help them go through their face up to their challenges or face up to what they need to be thinking about by doing other things. So experimentation, I think, is just brilliant in this type of work. And then supervision. Well, we've just touched on that. And I know Zoe actually has kind of colluded with that as she's come back on the chat. We do need to have forms of supervision that actually support the coach, whether that be group supervision, action learning sets, whether you find your own supervisor, whatever. And I spent some time with my supervisor this morning, actually. But that becomes really, really important. So just to summarize, I would say that there are 3 pillars that are absolutely essential for this type of work. The first one is your work on self, own development. The second one would be learning and practicing with our clients and developing our practice to keep ourselves safe. And the third one is about being in community with like-minded people and finding our own tribe or our own community that we work with on this sort of work. And I would love to have further conversations with you about this. So what does this actually mean when we sort of start taking it forward? The outcomes of this type of coaching create longer term excellence, because we're drawing not only on our best qualities and intentions, but we're drawing on the client's best qualities and intentions. And there is something that happens, which is the magic between the two. And that's often the learning for both, and both will be changed. We will be changed as the coach, just as the coachee will be changed by us. And we should be allowing that to happen. And that kind of flies against the neutrality, the old style neutrality of coaching. The self-correcting, now, I actually think this becomes a really important part of this type of coaching, because what we're trying to do is to try and create self-observation by the person that we're coaching, and for us as well. We need to be able to self-observe what we do, the impact that we have, what's going on for the other person. So they're looking at not just the actions and the results, but they're able to kind of almost feel and see what's going on for them in terms of that self-observation. And as I said, journaling is a fantastic way to get people to actually reflect on that. Feedback in all its shapes and forms will also help feed into that self-correcting way of operating. And I think for leadership, that becomes really important. And the best leaders I've ever seen are able to do that in the moment. But then the next part is actually moving into very much a self-generating model, so that we are able to self-generate on our own. to discover and act from our inner resources and imagination. And actually, some of this is much more healthy to do it from a spacious point. So creating some spaciousness in our world and our work so that we're able to be self-generating, and developing the practices that make that happen for us, whatever they might be. So for me, some of my self-generating practices, I mean, you wouldn't be surprised, are things like my yoga, my meditation, my sitting practice, the time I spend with my horse. You know, I actually spend a lot of time on that work because I feel that I can't pour from an empty cup. So if I've done that work for myself, I'm much more likely to bring it into the work and being with my clients. And most of those things that I'm describing are somatic. So I've worked very hard personally on my somatic practice because I probably came in as a coach in a very cognitive space. So I've used that self-correcting behavior to move it into being much more self-generative. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Again, if there's any questions or thoughts, I'm more than happy to answer them. So we are running towards the end of my slides, so there will be some opportunities for some questions. But in this way of being as a coach, it's not about being neutral. I think I've said that already. It's no longer just being the mirror to reflect back to our clients. We are actually taking a more active and less neutral approach so that we really can get alongside them. There's obviously pictures here about me being in the presence with them, and actually that is fantastic to be able to do that. But I spend a lot of time coaching online in a virtual way, and I can feel a real positivity in that. I find that people feel very often very safe in their little box, and they can get into things which are much more personal and much more much deeper, maybe emotionally, in a safe way in that environment, which I'm always fascinated by. And sometimes, dare I say it, men find that easier. I don't know why, and it's not scientific, but I find that I can open up that conversation. And if I'm self-observing, that could be me. It could be there's something about me that actually makes that feel safer. It could be because it's safer for me, or it could be it's safer for them. But that's what I mean by the self-observational behavior here. So that's really, really interesting. What we're trying to do is we're trying to blend this kind of advocacy and inquiry so that we're looking at the thing that the coachee is bringing to us in a way that we're shoulder to shoulder, looking at it differently, because we've both got different structures of interpretation, and looking at the same problem and thinking and helping and supporting a way forward, of which neither party will be changed from that. So by doing the things that might make sense, by doing some music, going for a walk, spending time with a horse, maybe some poetry, all of those things maybe were helpful. Thank you. The disinhibit, I can't even pronounce it, but I know what you mean there. So actually, there's all sorts of things I'd like to leave you with here, but I'm going to stop. Before we leave you with that, I'm going to stop because we have got a few minutes that we could explore some of this together. So let me stop sharing just for a minute before we do the roundup slides. I would be delighted to bring you into this community and have a conversation for the next few minutes. So anybody want to say something? Happy to be controversial, happy to not like what I'm saying, but anybody like to air something at this stage? Oh, yes, Emma Longley.
Oh. Hello.
Hello.
I feel really inspired by this because
I've been worried for a while about use of AI, obviously working in universities and students and their experience of the world. And actually, like the other lady that just spoke about how it aligns with how you are, I feel quite energized by this conversation, that actually we can take the power back. And there are things AI can do for us, but also that we still have value, and that our humanness is valuable to others. Because I look at my teenage children and I look at the interactions they have in the world, and they're very different to the interactions I have. That doesn't make them wrong. It's just how I felt like I was a bit powerless before. So this has really inspired me. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Emma. We are all beautiful humans, and we are all beautiful, messy humans. The messiness of humanity is really out there, isn't it? And this is a way for us to embrace what it is to be human and some of the challenges and difficulties that we feel. Yes, Zoe.
Thanks, Alex. And you know, I'm really, really inspired by this, and have been trying to bring this kind of approach into my coaching practice for some time, and every day is a school day and all of that. I'm just wondering how, as you're sort of embracing this new way of coaching, how you explain it to your clients or prospective clients, because I was at a coaching conference yesterday in York, and there was a number of us having this conversation about holistic coaching and well-being coaching. And often people come to coaching with something in their head which, you know, at its essence ends up being much more around this kind of coaching that is needed, but they wouldn't come with that as the ostensible issue. So yeah, how do you?
Well, I would call it integral coaching. Integral development coaching is kind of my sort of label. Obviously, I'm transitioning to the human-centered, but in a more corporate conversation, I would probably be calling it integral development coaching, because that's people have an appetite for that. That feels safer. And I bring this into all my coaching. I can't not. It's just what I do now. You can't unlearn what you have in your kit bag. And for some people, I would be more obvious about it, and for some, slightly less so. But I'm thinking about a particular client who I've got in my mind at the moment, who wasn't even sure that could be in the same place with somebody to have a normal coaching moment. And we've delved into this approach over the last 2 or 3 months. And I am just in awe of the change this person has made. I'm in awe of the changing in behaviours, the changing in practices, the changing in structure of interpretation. Somebody that was so closed to even having an open conversation. And it's really interesting that this particular person I've got in mind, the HR director came and said to me when I was there the other day, I have no idea what you've done to this person, Alex, but his whole way of being has changed. And that's not what I've done. I've done nothing. I've done nothing, really. It's what this other person has done. The work they've put in has just been awe-inspiring. Any other further questions? I know it's a big group, and sometimes it's hard to speak up when, you know, maybe I'm sure people have got questions. I'm more than happy to answer anything, to have a conversation further about this. I feel so passionate about it. I feel so passionate about taking this approach into our leadership development, because for me, if you can't be safe with yourself, how can you lead others? How can you be safe with others? How can you do that in an effective way? And I think this type of coaching leaks into work that we do with our leaders specifically as other people. But I've got 2 more slides to show you before you go. So I'm just going to share them with you quickly, we will be sending you this slide pack, and this is just going to tell you what we plan to do. We've only got a couple more minutes. So what we would like to do, and our leading thoughts are, we'd like you to go away and think about what possibilities do you actually have to adapt your own practice and that of your organisation, maybe about this approach. What conversations do you need to have, and with whom? There are 3 types of conversation, I tend to say, with people. There is a conversation for relationship, there's a conversation for possibility, and there's a conversation for action. And for me, this is about a conversation for possibility. What conversation do you have for possibility around this? And what language would be good for you to develop? And what practices would be good for you to develop to be this type of coach around maybe those 6 competencies that I shared with you earlier? Because the work has to start in my world from you, from us as coaches. We would love to stay in community with you. We believe that this is all part of a community. And we would like to create that conversation about what the possibility is for you to develop this further and to develop your practice. Our idea at the moment is to have a follow-up session where we could get a little bit deeper into this. We'd love you to come along, but we'll reach out to you. And we'd love to be part of this community going forward, because I feel it is still quite new. We'd love to see you next time in anything else that we do. We've got a couple of these leadership support circles coming up, so we'd love to see you there. But has anybody got any final questions or any final thoughts you would like to leave us with? I'm going to take that off sharing. No, I must apologise for the lawnmower. I hope that didn't get too noisy for anybody. I hope you've really enjoyed the session today. We've loved being in community with you. We will send you out the slides. We'll send you out some information about the 6 streams of competency, and we're more than willing to support in any way that we can. So on that note, Darren, I think, have you got anything you'd like to say? Otherwise, I'm going to close the session now.
No, thank you. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everybody. And we'll be in touch with the deck. And as Alex says, a bit more information on those 6 competencies, which hopefully will help you with those closing questions about, how you might start thinking about adapting your practice.
And it's so lovely to see some old friends as well as new. It's lovely to see you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Alex. Thanks,
Bye.